Hey there, and welcome. Today, let's talk about something I think we all know a little too well, that feeling of being just completely drained. When everything on the outside looks perfectly fine, but inside, you're just running on empty.
So let me just start with this question, aimed right at you. How are you, really? And I mean it. It's a question we throw around all day, but how often do we actually pause and wait for the real answer?
And that's pretty much the core of what we're diving into, isn't it? That phrase, I'm fine. It's like this automatic reflex, this placeholder. It's just so much easier than trying to put a name to that heavy feeling you might be carrying around. It's our social armor, really.
Okay, so let's start there, with this whole performance of fine. It's this social script we've all memorized. But what happens when that mask starts to slip?
So picture this. There's this woman just making a cup of tea. A totally normal morning. But for the first time in, well, a long time, she actually stops and asks herself, why am I doing all of this? The early mornings, forcing a smile in every conversation, this constant, exhausting performance. And just whispering that to herself, I'm not fine, it didn't magically fix anything. She didn't march into her boss's office the next day or anything like that. But what it did was create this tiny bit of space, a little crack in that armor she'd been wearing. And just in that crack, she could finally take a real breath. It was the very beginning of honesty.
So where does this pressure even come from? Well, a lot of the time, this performance of being fine is tangled up with our work, right? And the praise, the validation we get from it. What happens when who we are gets completely knotted up with what we do?
And that brings us to this other story, about a guy who just keeps working, long after everyone's gone home, long after the applause has stopped. He's already won. He's earned the right to rest. But the idea of stopping? That's way scarier to him than the exhaustion. So he stays. Not because anyone's making him, but because he's terrified of what happens when it all goes quiet.
And this just nails the core issue, doesn't it? The burnout? It's not really about the work itself. It's about this deep, deep need for the work to tell us we matter. We're basically taught that if people see you being productive, you have value. So the second you stop, you feel like you might just disappear. And that fear of being invisible, wow, that can feel so much worse than being tired.
And that's the trap right there. We can call it identity fused with achievement. It's when you start to believe that you are your output. You are your to-do list. So taking a day off doesn't just feel like a break. It feels like you're losing a piece of yourself. And of course, you're going to protect that, even if it costs you your own sanity.
Okay, so what's the real cost here? Burnout isn't always this big, dramatic explosion. Most of the time, it's more like a slow leak in a tire. It's so quiet and gradual that you barely notice the signs until you're completely flat.
So let's go through some of these quiet signs. See if any of this sounds familiar. Like waking up just as tired as when you went to bed. Feeling kind of detached, almost like you're an actor playing the part of yourself. Or getting super irritated over tiny things. The Wi-Fi buffering. That job you used to love, now it just feels blah. Or maybe the scariest one. You realize you don't even know what you want anymore. And this is such a key distinction to make. Think about it like this. Physical tiredness, that's your phone at 1% battery. You plug it in, you sleep, and you're recharged. Simple. But emotional exhaustion, that's like having 100 apps open in the background, all draining your resources. Just plugging in for the night, getting some sleep, it doesn't close the apps. You need a different kind of shutdown. All right, so we've been diagnosing the problem. Let's shift gears a little. This next part isn't about giving you more self-care homework. It's actually the opposite. It's about remembering that you were never broken in the first place. So let's just pause and sit with this question for a second. How might you honor your energy instead of just pushing through it?
And here's the next one. How might we, as a culture, in our workplaces, start to honor silence just as much as we celebrate output?
And this brings us right back to the beginning. What would it take to make it feel safe, truly safe, to just say, I'm not okay? So these aren't rules you have to follow. Think of them more like little experiments. Like, what if you just named the feeling out loud, just for you? Or what if you intentionally let one little thing go unfinished today and just see what happens? Spoiler, the world keeps spinning. Or maybe just sit still for 2 minutes. No goal, not trying to be good at meditating, just being. And all of this really leads to a huge reframing of how we see our lives. We've all been handed these definitions of success, right? But what if we decided to write our own? What if the goal, the real metric, wasn't about achievement, but about peace?
I mean, we learn this so young, don't we? That a packed calendar means you're important. That if you're not hustling, you're falling behind. So we turn our lives into these giant to-do lists. And we feel good when we check things off, but we rarely stop to ask if we even wanted to do those things in the first place.
Which leads to a really powerful question to ask yourself. What are you measuring that just doesn't matter? What score are you trying to rack up, and who even made the rules for that game?
And this brings us right back to that guy working alone in the dark. Eventually, he had a realization. He didn't hate creating things. He hated the lie that he had to create things to be worthy. He finally understood that your worth isn't something you have to earn. And that person behind the performance, they don't need another round of applause. They just need some rest.
So, I'm going to leave you with this one last thought to chew on. We spend so much of our lives treating peace like a reward we get at the finish line, right? After we've controlled every variable and fixed every problem. But what if peace isn't the result of having more control? What if it's what rushes in the moment we finally let go?